Hey, welcome back. I am excited about today because we are going to talk about changing your story. I am going to give you 10 different kinds of stories that we tell ourselves, and then I'm going to show you how to change those stories, how to take action that will change the stories and it will change your life. And the reason I picked this one is because guess what? This is the one I'm working on this year, and I think it's really powerful. Here are some of the kinds of stories we tell ourselves. Number one, we tell ourselves story about our personalities, about how outgoing we are, about how shy we are, about how we interact with other people. The second one is we tell ourselves stories about what other people think of us or what other people think, period, about what other people think about something else. If they vote for Trump, they must think this. If they vote for Biden, they must think that. We tell ourselves things about what people think about our family, about the people we love, and we make assumptions. The third type of story we tell ourselves is about our bodies. We tell ourselves so many lies about our bodies, about what's good enough, about what's skinny enough, about what's fat enough and thin enough, all of the things. The fourth kinds of stories that we tell ourselves are about our jobs, whether our boss likes us or not, whether other people in the office are talking about us, whether we're successful, whether we're going to be successful or not successful, whether this job is good enough or not worthy of me. The fifth kind of story we tell ourselves is about relationships, about how good they are, how bad they are, if someone cares about us, if someone doesn't. And we tell ourselves stories about why they do things in relationships. Oh, he must not love me. Oh, she must think I'm so dumb. Oh, she must be mad at me. Oh, because she's mad at me, she thinks I'm bad. Oh, he doesn't want to do that for me. The sixth kind of story we tell ourselves is about our skills. Oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm not very good at math. Oh, I'm really good at English. I'll never be able to learn another language. The seventh kind of story we tell ourselves is about our value, how much we're worth. Oh, I'm not good enough. Whether we're enough for any kind of situation, for any kind of relationship. The eighth kind of story we tell ourselves is about why we act a certain way. Oh, I'm just that way. I was born like that. Oh, it's in my family. My Aunt Edna did that, and that's why I behave that way. Or it's the way I was treated when I was growing up, or it's because of the trials I went through. These are stories we tell ourselves. The ninth kind of story we tell ourselves is about ways that we are good or bad. Oh, because I do this, I'm bad. Or because I do this, that makes me better than someone else. The 10th kind of story we tell ourselves is about why we're having the struggles we're having. Well, this happened to me because, or I brought this on myself. This is my fault, or this is someone else's fault, and I won't take accountability. There are lots of different stories we tell ourselves, and they can be beautiful and helpful, or they can be damaging. And so I want to talk about this because problems live in stories. The problem is because we tell ourselves it's a problem. You might think that that's not true, but let me give you an example, an extreme example that shows you what I mean. If you have a child that dies, anyone, you would think that anyone would say, oh, that's horrible. That is bad, and that's a sad thing. And yet, there are parents who, believing that this world is too hard for their children, they will kill their own children so that their children can be in a better place. So when their children die, they're not sad. They think it's a good thing. They think it's happy. Do you see how it's all about the stories we tell ourselves? I used a really extreme example because I want you to understand. I tried to use an example that you can't imagine any possible way that that could be a good thing. But that is why I used that example. And the reason I'm talking about this topic is because once you understand the truth, there's no real problem. It's just the truth. It just is. It's not good. It's not bad. And when something just is, if you don't tell a story around it, the story is what creates the feelings. So if you have a story that creates negative feelings, now you feel like it's a bad story or that thing that happened was bad. But if the stories that you're telling yourself create good feelings, now you feel like it's a good story and you're glad that that happened. But when it's just the truth, it just is. And when something just is, the only thing left is to figure out what the next step is. It's not good or bad, it's a next step. Now I'm telling you, this is a very advanced idea and thought. And so it takes a lot of practice to get to the point where you really believe it just is. because you want to argue with that can't be true. But my story about this thing that happened to me is not good. You can't say it just is, that it's not good or it's not bad. And those of you who've been learning about this, you know that you're starting to see how it can be. I'm going to give you some examples of things you might say when you are starting to tell yourself a story, because I want you to be able to identify it. So these are some things you might say. Well, he just thinks. He just thinks what? You're making an assumption. They're just trying to what? They're trying to what? They're trying to get back at you. They're trying to hurt you. They're trying to help you and make your life easier. What are they just trying to do? She just wants to what? She just wants to make me look bad. She just wants to gossip about me. She just wants to what? What does she just want to do? You don't really know. Usually we don't know. You don't know until you ask. I can't fill in the blank. I can't do that. I can't learn math. I can't learn a language. I can't have a healthy relationship. Here's another one. This is stopping me. What? My trial is what's stopping me. This problem that I have in my life is what's stopping me. The struggle I went through that made me who I am, that's what's stopping me. Another one. This is the reason I can't. It's kind of the same, it's a similar thing, but you give yourself a reason. Or this is the reason I can't. It's all the same thing. So I want you to pay attention to when you do this, when you start to tell yourself stories. And most of you will be able to quickly identify some of the stories that you've been telling yourself for years, because you know what those are. I want to share something with you that Trevor McKendrick said. He's an entrepreneur, businessman. In his newsletter, he talks about how he was talking with a Disney executive who was a friend of his who works in Beijing. And he asked him what he thought about China's competitiveness with the United States. And because it's a big topic these days, it's something you hear about kind of frequently, that China is working harder, they're moving faster, they're growing more. This is kind of on the internet, and we kind of see this. These are all the narratives. So Trevor asked him, are they doing better than the US? And in Trevor's words, he said, and his stupid, simple response made me stop. His friend asked him, what do you mean by doing better? And Trevor says, and I hesitated because I had to actually think about it. What exactly did I mean by they work harder or that they're more innovative? What does it even mean for one country to be doing better than another? He said, I had an opinion built from a story that I had consumed by reading hundreds of tweets, headlines, articles, etc., but never from looking at actual data. Now, he's talking about data about a country. But if you're looking at real data in your relationships, in whether your business is going the direction you want it to go, in your mindset, you have to identify what that data is. The data is the results you're getting. And so you have to look at the real results. One of the problems with the way that we look at results is the way we measure. We measure based on where we want to be. So there's a book called The Gap and the Gain. It's by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and they explain it extremely well. They explain that most people measure their results based on where they are, and then they measure where they wish they were. Instead, what we need to be doing is look at where we are and measure backwards. Look at where we came from. Look at where we started and measure up to where we are. And then we see the real truth of the results. Let me tell you what happens with our brains. Whether or not you tell yourself stories that are not true matters, because this is what happens. We start to tell ourselves a story, and then our brain fills in the holes. Let me tell you what that looks like. Our brains are taking in millions of pieces of information every second from everywhere, and it's using every single one of our senses to bring in that information. Everything I smell, everything I taste, it's bringing that information into my brain, and it's using all of my senses to do it. As soon as you tell yourself a story, your brain uses all those millions of pieces of information to fill in the holes and to try to prove that that story is true. This gift of our brain creating this reality for us is a beautiful, beautiful gift. And we can use it for good or evil. And I mean it when I say evil. I don't use that word lightly. What exactly does evil mean? It means morally reprehensible. It is morally reprehensible that you would demean yourself or someone else with lies about their intentions or about who they are, about their value. If it's the truth, then you're not telling yourself stories that aren't true. If it's not a true story, then it's evil. It's morally reprehensible. The cool thing about this is it's the exact same thing that happens in your brain when you make a decision. If you are at the grocery store and you're looking for a particular item, let's say bread, your brain now has a mission. Your brain is taking all those millions of pieces of information in and looking for bread. It is trying to help you solve that problem. When you're not looking for bread, your brain isn't trying to help you find bread. So you don't notice it when you go to the grocery store, you go out and about, you're not noticing the bread everywhere. But when you are needing bread, your brain sees it in so many places. When you make a decision, your brain takes all those millions of pieces of information and tries to figure out a way to help you make that happen. This is using that beautiful gift of your brain for good. So it doesn't matter what stories we tell ourselves. Our brain will create a reality that fits it. And it all depends on what you focus on. My mentor, Myron Golden, pointed out to me that in the story of Adam and Eve had so much abundance. They had trees of every kind. That's what it says. So they had apple trees, they had orange trees, mango trees, lemon, pear, apricot trees, persimmon trees, coconut trees, plum trees, mulberry trees, Indian gooseberry, cherry tree. Oh, just kidding. No, they probably had that kind of tree too. They had peach trees, they had fig trees, they had every kind of tree you could imagine. And they couldn't eat from the tree of life. And so where was their focus? There was a point at which their focus went on the one thing they couldn't have. And all of a sudden, everything started to change. What you see as your biggest problem is the very thing that is trying to direct you to your greatest success. And my question to you is, are you getting it? Are you getting this? Because it will change your life. I want to tell you about a man named Shawn Stevenson. I heard him present at a conference, and I was blown away by this man. He is an example of someone who saw his problems and realized that they were an unfair advantage. Did you know that your problems are actually your unfair advantage? Shawn Stevenson was born with something that in layman's terms is called brittle bone disease. This meant that his bones would break extremely easily. In fact, they would break so easily that when he was born, most of his bones were broken during the delivery. And the doctors warned his parents that he probably wouldn't survive very long. He did survive, and he lived until the age of 40. What his disease did is it stunted his growth. So not only did he have really brittle bones and they would break really easily, he was 3 feet tall, he never got to walk, he lived his entire life in a wheelchair, and he often had broken bones that happened from simple movements that you and I take for granted. And when his bones would break, he couldn't go get a cast on them because just the act of putting the cast on would break more bones. So he had to lie still for the 6 weeks that it took for it to heal. I saw him share a story that changed my life, and it is a story I will never forget. He said that it was Halloween night, and he was so excited. He was 10 years old. He said Halloween was my favorite night of the entire year because everybody dressed up. And he said that one day, I didn't feel like I was different. I didn't feel like I was weird, and I felt like I fit in. So he said, I was so excited. I was at home with my mom, and he said I was rolling around on the ground because, of course, he can't walk. And he said, I couldn't wait for the Halloween party that night with the other kids. And as he was rolling around, he said, I heard part of my body hit the door jamb, and he heard it break. And he said there was that moment where he was just sick, that moment of pain when the pain hit. And he said, right before the pain hit, I thought, no, it's happening. Like, it can't be, because he knew he'd have it. He had that happen so many times. And so he said, then the pain came, and he was so frustrated. He said, I felt like this was so unfair. Why tonight? All I want is this one night. And he said, my mom heard my scream because it was painful. She ran into the room and she was trying to comfort him. And he said, usually when I was in that kind of situation where my bone had broken and my mom was trying to calm me down and I was in pain, she would bring up stories of past vacations that they had gone on. And she would say, remember this vacation? And it would help him calm down. And it would make him think of the memories. And it really helped. But he said, this time I was so angry. I was so angry. It was not fair. And he said, my mom was trying to comfort me and say these stories. And he just would have none of it. And she realized that he was at a place he had never been before. And this wise, unbelievable mother stood up and she stepped back from her son and she said this. She said, is this going to be a gift or an excuse the rest of your life? Can you imagine saying that to your child who you have seen suffer for all these years, never getting to have a normal life like another child? He said, when she said that to me, he said I was shocked. And I thought, are you kidding me? A gift? But he said he could not leave it alone. And it changed his life that day because she had said that. And I want you to know that Sean became one of the most powerful motivational speakers that I have ever heard. And I have heard motivational speakers around the world. He was a successful therapist, an author, and CEO. He became wealthy, helping other people learn how to get through their own trials. He recognized that he had an unfair advantage to follow his dream. I am telling you right now, your problem is the very thing that will catapult you to your greatest success if you will just change the story you are telling yourself about it. Sean has courses all over the internet that people are still buying today, and he has left a legacy that is so massive that hundreds of millions of people are still learning from him and changing their lives even after he is gone. You might think that Sean had an unfair disadvantage, but that's certainly not what he would say. You want to know what Sean used to say? He would say, if you have a heartbeat, there's still time for your dreams. Coming from Sean, you can't argue with that. He said, I'm not afraid to make mistakes. That's why my life rocks. I think it's time to stop telling ourselves the stories that are holding us down. So you might ask me, well, Teresa, what story should I tell myself then? Make it up. The story you're telling yourself now, you made up. This business is never going to work. You made that up. This business is going to crush it. We are going to get so massive. You made that up. I met this guy. He's going to ask me out. You made that up. I'm going to go down the stairs. You made that up. So make it up. Make up whatever story you want. I did. When I built my first business that turned into $1 billion business, that's what I did. I told myself a story. I went and talked to as many executives as I could who worked in that niche. And I wanted to know who was the most successful person and how big was their business, how much money were they making. And when I found out the answers to that question, I thought, okay, I know it's possible. That is possible. So that's my bare minimum goal. Because I now had made a decision, I had a goal, and I knew it was possible. I went and asked those same executives, now tell me exactly what he did to achieve that. They told me the answers, and I went and did every single thing that I possibly could. And it turned into $1 billion business with millions of people buying my product all over the world every single month. So if you're in the habit of telling yourself stories that are not true, which is what I've been battling the last 2 years, and that is why that's my theme for this year, how do you change the story? How do you change the habit so that your story is different? So that your story can help you become successful in whatever area of your life that you want to become successful. Because this is affecting your business, it's affecting your personal life, it's affecting your relationships, and it's affecting your mindset. So it's time to start telling yourself a different story. I'm going to give you 4 steps. It's very simple. I keep it simple, so it's absolutely doable. The first step is awareness. All you have to do is try to notice. Notice the stories you're telling yourself. Notice when you see your brother-in-law, if you're thinking, oh, brother, he's going to think he's better than me, or he's going to show off, if you're telling yourself a story that's negative about someone else or about yourself, it's time to change it. And the only thing you have to worry about first is just notice. Just be aware that you're telling yourself a story. That's all. The second step is admit. Admit that it's just a story. It's a story. It's not good. It's not bad. Is that the story you want to keep telling yourself, or do you want to change the story? I know it sounds too simple, but I am telling you, people have done this over and over and over again, and it works, and it changes you. The third thing I want you to do is to apologize to yourself for telling that. No, I'm just kidding. That's not really it. The third thing you need to do is you need to analyze. Analyze the story. Don't overanalyze it, but try to figure out, why am I telling myself this story? Have I just have believed it forever? Or this is what my family told me growing up, or this is what I've always believed. It doesn't matter. It's what our culture says. It's what my church says. It doesn't matter where it came from. So analyze where it came from. Analyze what it's doing in your life. Notice how it's affecting the different pieces of your life. If you believe something negative about someone, you don't trust them. You don't treat them the same way. Now, I'm not talking about truth. If there's someone in your life who has unhealthy behaviors, if they're abusive, if they're addictive, if they do things that are not healthy for you to be around, that's not what we're talking about. I'm not talking about changing the story about someone so that you make them sound good when they're not. Now you're still telling a story that is a lie. We are trying to get to the truth. So make sure when you analyze, you don't switch the story around because you feel guilty about the truth about someone. Just make sure that you're not adding to the story to embellish it and make it worse or better than it actually is. And the fourth thing that you need to do is amend the story. It's time to change the story and figure out how you're going to tell the story differently in your head. Because you can't just say, okay, well, I won't believe the story. Every time the story comes into your head, you've got to stop, be aware, analyze it, and change it to what the real truth is. So I'll give you an exercise that you can do that's actually kind of fun. You might feel a little shy to do this at first, but it is amazing how it helps you change the story in your head. I want you to tell your story out loud as if you're telling a child an exciting bedtime story. It can't be a boring, depressed, sad bedtime story. It has to be an exciting story. And you might be shy at first, but then it starts to get really fun. But here's the deal. You have to tell 2 versions of the story. One version is the one you always tell yourself. You say it out loud, and you say it as if it's real. And she was so stupid that nobody ever wanted to be around her. Or he was such a mess up that no girls ever liked him. Okay, you got to say what you have really been telling yourself. And when you say it out loud, you start to realize how untrue it is. And it makes this second part of the exercise way easier because now you've acknowledged that this is what you really tell yourself. And the second version of the story is the exact opposite of what you usually tell yourself. So I'm going to give you 2 examples, one that a girl might tell herself and one that a guy might tell himself. She was so beautiful that anytime she was around anyone, people couldn't help but stare at her. Her body was the perfect shape. It was exactly how a body should look. She got a lot of attention because she was so gorgeous. Everybody wanted to be around her. And as more and more people got to know her, the thing that surprised them the most was that she was even more beautiful on the inside. She was so kind and thoughtful and smart. Is that the story you tell yourself about yourself? Okay, here's the one for a guy. He was so hot. His bald head was a manly sight to behold. Women would try to talk to him and touch him on the arm just so they could feel his muscles. His muscles looked so perfect on his body, and he was never afraid to talk to a woman. People loved hanging out with him because he made the best smoked steak you ever tried. It couldn't be beat, and he could fix anything that needed fixing. Now, you guys, is that something you're telling yourself? Is that the story that you have in your head? Because we need to start changing the stories. It will change our lives. And as I've been working on changing the stories these last 2 years, it has changed my life. I have so many successes. I have so many skills. I remember I started going to see a therapist because I wanted to work on me. This is what he asked me to do at first because he thought I needed to become aware of positive things about myself, or that I had skills, or I had abilities. And so he said, after our first time together, he said, I want you to write down on a piece of paper every single thing about you, that some things that you're good at. And so I went home and I thought, he doesn't get it yet because I already know I can do a lot of things. I already know I'm good at so many things. So I wrote down on the list, and I wrote down crocheting, reading, writing. I wrote down cooking, baking, because I love to do all those things and I'm good at them. I don't feel arrogant. I just know that I'm good at those things. Gardening, child discipline, relationships. I had a massive list that almost didn't even fit on the piece of paper because I recognized that I have skills and abilities. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that I was telling myself stories that weren't true, stories that were holding me back. So it's time to stop doing that. So the challenge of the week, so that we can move forward and build up momentum as we go these next 7 days, is to change the stories you are telling yourself. If you need to review back the 4 different steps to do that, go listen to this again. I would love to see your comments. I want to see how it's working, what you're trying. Be vulnerable if you dare. I'm going to read them. So take the challenge this week and don't just think different. Be different.